Hi, today is May 22nd. We're at 190 Anza Street in the Museum of Local History. My name is Patricia Schaffarczyk, and we are interviewing a husband and wife, and their names are...
I'm Susanne Turner.
And?
David Turner.
Great, thank you very much. Well, welcome. We're talking about Niles, and your families both have a long history in the area. So what I'd like to ask first of all is, we're just going to start right off with asking how you met.
We met at the International Kitchen. I was a bus girl there. He lived there in the back, and we just, for a while, just saw each other back and forth, and then we finally started dating while I was in high school.
And when and where did you get married?
We got married at the Corpus Christi Church in Niles, August 26, 1961.
Wonderful.
We've been married 55 years, be 56 in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So let's start with each family then. I don't know, who wants to start telling how your family came here and first arrived?
My mother's family came here from Nova Scotia, from Canada, in the 1850s, 1860s, into Newark, and had ranches there. And then my mother grew up there and went to Washington High School. And then she moved to Berkeley, and that's where she met my dad, and they married. And then after the war, my father couldn't find a job, so they came back to Newark to work on the ranch. And then my mother went to work for Judge Quaresma, who had his private practice in Niles. So my folks built a home in Niles, and we moved to Niles about 1949.
Wow.
And
you moved to Niles from?
Newark.
From Newark.
From the ranch.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit about the names, first of all, of your grandmother was the first person who came to this area?
No, my great-great-grandparents.
Oh, can you give us their names, please?
I can give you, yes. My great-great-grandfather was Ebenezer Haley, and then they left and came back again and brought their sons, and my great-grandfather was Caleb Haley, and they had two ranches, one upper ranch and a lower ranch on Jarvis and Thornton Avenue and Mayhew's Landing Road. And my mother was not born there, but she was raised there. Her mother died when she was like 3 years old at childbirth.
What was her mother's name?
Her mother's name was Helen Vallette Haley, and she was married my grandfather, who was Thomas Maffey. And they lived on the ranch. My great-grandmother was quite in the society of Newark. And then my parents moved to Niles, and I've been there ever since.
So your mother, when was she born?
She was born in 1919, and she had a brother and two other sisters.
And their names?
Their name.
And your mother's name?
My mother's name was Marcella Maffey Hewitt, and her mother, she was a Haley, she had a brother, William Maffey, an older sister, Mary Lee Maffey, that left and went to Hawaii when my mother's sister was born, which is when my great-grandmother died, or my grandmother died. And then she had a younger sister, Helen Haley.
That was quite a large...
Maffey.
Now that's your mother's sister, so how many in the family?
4.
Okay.
There were 4.
And did all of those people stay in the area?
Her older sister, no. Her older sister was told by her uncle that if she stayed here, she'd probably be raising 3 small children, or 2 small children, because my uncle was a little older. So she went to Hawaii, and she stayed there and died there many, many, many years later. This all was in 1922. And then my mother and my aunt stayed here, and my uncle moved to Berkeley, and he was there for quite a while, but then he moved back to Niles in about 1952.
His name?
William Maffey.
William.
Mm-hmm. And we didn't live very far apart. There was like we lived on Goodrich Way, and they lived on, now Pickering, and there was like a field between us that we made new path every year.
Oh, that's great. So that was your uncle.
That was my uncle. That's my mother's brother.
Right. And the other sister?
The sister, Helen, she lived in Castro Valley, and she married and had 4 children of her own. And of the 4 children, my mother and her sister are the only ones that had children.
Okay. So your uncle and aunt who lived near you didn't have any children?
No, they had no children.
Okay. And wow, what a history of your family.
Yeah, they came. I've a lot of history on the Haley family because somebody did the genealogy back to 14 something or whatever.
And so your mother grew up on, where was the ranch located?
The ranch was actually located on Mayhew's Landing Drive, Road rather, and it was in Newark. There was an upper ranch, which was close to where Newark Boulevard is now, and the school, the grammar school, it was a high school at one time, was part of the property that my great uncle donated to the city so they could build a school. And then down by, down, still on Mayhew's Landing Road, close to Thornton Avenue, close to where the reserve is now, down by for the birds and things.
Right.
Don Edwards.
So do you remember that ranch?
Very well. Some of my happiest days there. I mean, I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood, but we lived there for 3 years, and I was 5. And I went to Newark Grammar School for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And then we were just 3 kids on a ranch. There were some around, but they were very far away, and we were too small to be able to really... So we found our own things to do and play on the ranch. And one of the things that we loved to do was to roll in the barley. But that was not very well liked by my great uncle at all.
So what did they have? What kind of...
Sugar beets, some cows, and barley.
So
That's what
most of their livelihood was from the barley and the sugar
Right.
beets, I would... Okay. Wow, that's a whole other story. This is
Yes.
amazing. Do you remember anything about Newark, the town, or did you go to
Yes.
school there too?
I went
You
to
did.
Newark Grammar School, but I lived in the town, actually in town for about 6 months while the house was being built in Niles. We had to leave the ranch because the people who were coming to take my dad's place, because now my dad had another job, was not going to be working on the ranch. They were coming, and so we had to leave so we rented a house in Newark, and I ran all over Newark. I mean, it was so different in the 40s then. And we had I remember there was a grocery store called Freeman's, I think, I can't recall. And we used to go around and get bottles from everybody that we knew and turn them in for money. And there was a post office, and there was a railroad tracks that we didn't get down that far because we lived up closer. But it was a nice time. I loved living in Newark, in the ranch especially. Not so much in the town, but
in the ranch. And you were there 3 years. And your dad, you said, worked for
Pardon me?
Your dad worked for...
At that time, he worked for my uncle, my great uncle,
Okay.
on the ranch.
And what did he do?
He just was a farmer. Whatever, drove the tractors, whatever had to be done. And then he went to work for Bill Dutra as a civil engineer, in a surveying job, and then he did that for the rest of his life.
Okay. So, wow. So what was your dad's name?
Clyde Hewitt.
Clyde Hewitt. And how did your mother meet him?
Let's see. My mother was living with a gal that my father was dating.
Oh, so they just met each other that way.
They just met each other that way, and one thing led to another, and he liked my mother more than he liked the other girl. So.
And where was this? Was this in Berkeley?
This was in Berkeley.
Okay.
Because my father lived in Berkeley. Yes,
And your mother lived in Berkeley also?
Just for a short time. She moved there when she was 16. I think she got a little bit too much for my great-grandmother to take care of. And she was raising her on the ranch in Newark. So she went to live with her brother.
Oh, I see, because her mother
Had died when she was 3.
Oh, so the grandparents, when the mother died, then the grandparents...
Well, no, my grandfather took care of her for a while, but he died when she was 12. And before that, she was going to school at St. Elizabeth's in Oakland. It was a boarding school, Catholic school in Oakland.
Oh, so she had a hard
did.
time.
And I didn't
because-
find this out till many years later, but she lived in foster homes. And she was kind of quiet about those kind of things for some reason. She didn't tell us a lot.
What about the other children? Same.
They were also, one was in a foster home who became her guardian. Actually, she felt that that was her mother. She lived there. But I think my mother gave her a little too much trouble and had to leave. So she was in other homes. And then she went to live on the ranch. And she lived there for quite a while until she was 16.
And then went.
And then she
your
went to
uncles
Oakland.
and
Yeah.
Then met your dad.
Then
and
my dad.
when did they get married?
1939.
All right.
She-
And right after they got married, then did they?
They
Come to
stayed there.
Newark?
No, they didn't come to Newark until 1945, after the war. After the war, that my father couldn't find a job, so they decided to come to my great uncle's because he could put him to work.
He could have. Yeah.
And so we were there for 3 years, almost 4, and then we moved to Niles when my mother got the job with the judge.
Okay. So you were born in Berkeley?
In
or-
Berkeley, Alta Base Hospital in Berkeley in 1940.
Okay, that's great. And then again, then in 45,
We moved to Newark,
you moved to Newark.
where there had been people there since 1860s that were relatives. In fact, there's other Haleys around here that I've never met that were brothers of the brother of my great-great-grandfather.
Oh, what a great story. Okay, now you're coming up to Niles. When did you move to Niles?
We moved to Niles when I was in the 4th grade, and I went to, there was like 5 families. We all lived around together in the Ellsworth tract off of Mission Boulevard, right close to where Maori is now. And we all went to St. Mary's of the Palms, which is here in Mission San Jose, for 2 years. And I was in 4th and 5th grade there, and then I begged and pleaded my mother to please let me go to public school because all my friends that I knew were at Niles Grammar School. And so then she relented, and we did. We all went to Niles Grammar School and I
And
graduated.
so you went straight to the home on Goodrich?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the address or is?
38565 Goodrich Way, and it was in the Ellsworth tract, and it was built by Dan Bodley, who built a lot of homes in Niles and around the area. And there was probably 25 to 30 kids on the 3 streets that were there. I mean, we had so much fun.
What a great, and what year was that?
That was 1949 when when we actually moved into the house, I believe. And I lived there till I got married in 1961.
Wow.
And I
Are-
met my
is-
husband. And
Is the home still there?
sadly, no. The home was bought, and my father died in 2002. And my mother had already died. She died in 1991. My father died in 2002, and we sold the house to a fellow who was going to do all these things to it, and the city kind of gave him a little bit of trouble with the footprint, so he decided to tear it all down and built another house.
Oh,
And then he
so
moved to
it's-
Oregon.
Oh, that's
He
too
sold it, he
bad.
built to sell it. But it's a pretty house, But most of the houses that are on that block, not all, but many, have all been redone. Because some of them were flat top houses, and my folks had always wanted to put a new roof on it, and they never quite got that done. But we had a lot of fun. We rode the railroad tracks, we rode our bikes all over everywhere, and Niles was fun. We enjoyed, and my husband who lived in Niles, my very best friend in Niles, lived right next door. And I never knew that until I met David
Oh, my
many years later.
goodness.
Many years later.
So we're going to sort of catch up with David now, okay? Can you tell me how your family first came to this area?
We have a record or a map showing they came in the late 1850s. Because the one date on the map that showed the road said 1859. So I figured they came around 1850s. And on the Briscoe side, they bought 200 acres on Sheridan Road. And I guess they were ranchers. And they would, I think they raised cattle, barley and maybe fruit trees. But
Now, who was this person? How was this person related to you?
the Briscoes were my great-grandparents.
Okay, and their names? Do you know the husband and wife?
Edwin and I don't remember his wife's.
Okay, so Edwin
name.
Briscoe
Briscoe,
came and eventually purchased 200 acres
200 acres
off of Sheraton Road.
Sheridan Road.
Okay,
And they're buried on the Mission
cemetery at
Cemetery on the hill.
you mean the one on Mission Boulevard?
Yeah.
Okay, the Briscoes.
Briscoes are buried there.
Okay.
All my family's buried there.
Oh,
Turners
wow.
too.
And the
All
Turners.
Turners too.
So their name was Briscoe.
Briscoe.
And how many children did they have?
Two that I know of. My grandmother, I think she had a sister, which I'm not too positive.
So what was your grandmother's name?
Margaret
Margaret Briscoe.
Margaret Briscoe. And she later on married a Turner, James Turner.
James Turner.
And then the Briscoes also had one of the first general stores in Mission San Jose.
So they got married and lived, and where did they live? In Mission San Jose?
That I don't know. There's a home built on Mission Boulevard, a block up from the sister's property. And I imagine they lived there, but because later on, both my grandfathers died before I knew. I was born in 34, and one died in 33, and one died in early 34, so I didn't get to know my grandfathers at all.
So your parents, your mother or father?
My mother and
your father was born of the Turners who had the store in Mission San Jose.
Mhm.
How many brothers and sisters did he have?
He had one. One brother lived,
Billy.
and he lived on the ranch for a long time.
And his
He
name?
never married. His name was William. We call him Bill.
And he lived on the ranch on Sheraton Road?
Yeah, for a long time. The original home was I remember when I was real small, they would go up there and walk around the property. And the Briscoes had built a two-story, real big two-story home, but it was all crumbling and falling down.
Mm-hmm.
But and then later on, they built a small cabin that my uncle lived in for a long time. He never married. He was a bachelor. He lived there for a long time until he died.
Okay, and then your dad then grew up in Mission San Jose.
Right.
What kind of work did he do?
He worked for Wedgwood Stoves for many years in Newark.
Oh, Wedgwood?
Wedgwood.
Okay.
In fact, our stove we have in the house, he put together. It was built. Our stove was made in
1940, I think.
1940 or 41, and we use it to
It
this
still
day.
serves us.
The Wedgwood stove. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Good stove.
That's wonderful.
And,
So he worked for Wedgwood
Wedgwood
Stove.
Stove for many years, and then when they moved or closed down, he went to work for Alameda County, the road crew,
Oh, okay.
road maintenance, I guess you would call it.
And your mother? What was her name?
Leona Cornack,
Cornet.
which they also, her mother, and they grew up right off of Sheridan Road on Andrade, and they had 20 acres on Andrade. So the Turners and the Cornacks knew one another. You know,
So it's just natural for them to
they
marry,
met-
right?
One was from Ireland, the other was from France.
Yeah.
Ah.
They, my dad used to say they would, they didn't have cars, so they would hook up horses to wagons and come down to Mission San Jose to get supplies. And I guess that how my father met my mother in town one time and started dating. They got married. Well, she really young. She was, I think, 15.
15 or 16, yeah.
And then they started a family. And
And where was the home then? Where did they live?
they were renting a home on 2nd Street in Niles, right across the street from the Catholic Church. Now, I don't know how long they lived there, but then my dad had the house built on Niles Boulevard. Well, back then it was called First Street, and that was built in 1940.